We think that's downtown airport.
Yeah. God, that's crazy.
Yeah. This apparently was a stunt flyer who died in a stunt. Not here, but I like that he's wearing a tie.
Yeah, everybody wore ties in those days.
Chuck Haddix is no stranger to the ways of the 1920s. We're showing the archivist and author some of the films that this guy, Joe Tomelleri, bought without knowing what was on them. Only to find out they're full of moving pictures of Kansas City from nearly 100 years ago.
It's the 1920s. I mean, it's known as the Roaring Twenties for good reason. You know, it's an era of great technological and social change, too. Women bobbed their hair, their hemlines came up. Young men drank out of flasks they carried around in their back pocket. The nation becomes mobile for the first time.
On this installment of Real Rare, we're focused on recreation, games, stunts, and the big top.
Circuses were very popular beginning in the late 1890s through the early 20th century. It was a big deal when circuses came in town. They drew thousands of people. Some of the research I've done on the Sells-Floto circus showed that they came through in the 1920s frequently. And they were at 17th Street in Indiana, which is now I-70, next to the Postal Service facility. My favorite part of that footage is the opening of the men synchronized driving the stakes into the circus tent. I just thought that was spectacular.
The Sells-Floto Circus had connections here. Its owners, Frederick Bonfils and Henry Hammonds, also owned the Kansas City Post newspaper. At one point, Buffalo Bill Cody toured with Sells-Floto. So did Tom Mix. On this day in 1928, hula dancers and their band were drawing quite a crowd. There's also another circus troupe in the films Joe's found. Check out this crazy behind-the-tent peek at the John Robinson Circus. But Kansas Citians could also see wildlife just about any time they wanted at the zoo. By 1928, the original animal house in Swope Park had expanded considerably, setting in motion the way the zoo would look for many years to come.
I'm just old enough to remember the animal cages at the zoo, and I kind of had an impulse not to watch, but I thought, come on. I was a kid and I would just thought that was great that you could walk up right to those cages.
Swope Park also had a golf course. Whether this is it or not is hard to say, but hitting the links got considerably easier with the advent of the automobile. We do know what people did here at 22nd and Brooklyn. They went to baseball games. This was eventually the site of Municipal Stadium, and before that, Mulebach Field, which was built in 1923. Both the Monarchs and the minor league Kansas City Blues played there in games like these.
This has been a sports town, always been a sports town, and people turned out for those things. They got to see some of the players that became really big in the majors or in the bigs, as they say, but they saw them back when they were not so big.
There were two movies of the baseball game. One was 1927 and one was 1929, and I figured out that the 1929 game was the fourth game of the 1929 Little World Series between Rochester and the Kansas City Blues. And that's pretty cool to me to be able to fill that in, because it's just not having a bunch of people at a baseball game. It's knowing the date. It's knowing who's the manager that's out hitting fungos to his players before the game, or who's number 6 on the field.
Or what is that radio doing out on the pitcher's mound? We'll get into that next time, but first, there is something else about the ballpark we're all puzzled by.
Near the wall, it angles up, and there were people in the field of play watching the game. That seemed rather peculiar.
Among the fans in the stands, in both 27 and 29, is the machine's favorite city manager, Henry McElroy. George Mulebach Jr., who owned the team, as well as a hotel and a brewery, isn't shown at either game, but he does pop up in the films. First at his home across from the fountain at Myers Circle, then on an outing at what Joe believes is Lake Taneycomo. with his wife Roxanne and a group of friends including Robert and Monica Kidner. Detective Joe tracked that part down too.
That's what the fun of it. It's not like I went to school to learn this stuff. It's kind of seat of the pants. I'm anxious for people to see them, and some historian is going to know who some of these people are.
Let's finish where we began, with the thrill of air travel. Not long before this film was shot, Charles Lindbergh had flown in to dedicate the city's new airfield north of downtown. Luxurious it wasn't. A whole lot of Pendergast concrete was going to be needed here.
The whole facility was just the hangar. I mean, it didn't look like it had a visitor center or anything like that. You can see the trains going behind it. I think that was the beginning of the Municipal Airport that was to become much bigger eventually.
As an archivist, I have to say that this is a treasure. It provides us with a window to Kansas City in the 1920s that we have never seen before.
In the next installment of Real Rare, we'll focus in on the role that radio played here in found films from the 1920s and 30s. For the Kansas City Star and the Kansas City Public Library, I'm Randy Mason.